They say that sometimes the most innocent discoveries reveal the darkest truths, but I never expected that my wife's sudden passion for genealogy research would lead me to uncover not just her affair, but a systematic deception about our entire family history, ultimately driving me to orchestrate a revenge so comprehensive that it exposed her lies and destroyed the false identity she had built our marriage on. My name is Edward, and this is the story of how discovering my wife's fabricated past led me to expose her infidelity and fraud in the most devastating way possible. My wife Catherine and I had been married for 7 years when she developed what seemed like a genuine interest in genealogy and family history research. Catherine had always been somewhat secretive about her background and family, claiming that her parents had died when she was young and that she had been raised by distant relatives who had also passed away. Catherine's interest in genealogy began when she announced that she wanted to research our family histories to create a comprehensive family tree for our future children. She seemed excited about the project and spent hours online researching genealogy websites, DNA testing services, and historical records. Initially, I was supportive of Catherine's genealogy research and impressed by her dedication to understanding our family backgrounds. She would spend entire evenings working on her laptop, claiming to be tracing family lineages and documenting historical information about our ancestors. Catherine also began to share interesting discoveries about her family history, telling me stories about ancestors she had supposedly found through her research. She would describe relatives who had been successful business owners, war heroes, or notable figures in their communities, and she seemed proud of the distinguished family heritage she was uncovering. Most importantly, Catherine's genealogy research seemed to be bringing her joy and giving her a sense of connection to her past that she had never had before. She would talk enthusiastically about the relatives she was discovering and the family stories she was learning through her research. However, as months passed, I began to notice some inconsistencies in Catherine's genealogy research and the stories she was telling me about her family history. The details she shared would sometimes change between conversations, and she would become defensive when I asked questions about specific relatives or family events. Most concerning of all, Catherine began to be secretive about her genealogy research in ways that seemed unusual and unnecessary. She would close her laptop when I entered the room, and she would become evasive when I asked to see the family trees or historical documents she was supposedly creating. When I suggested that we could work on the genealogy research together or that I could help her organize the information she was gathering, Catherine would insist that she preferred to work alone and that she would share her findings with me when she had completed her research. These behaviors seemed inconsistent with the collaborative approach that had characterized our marriage, and I began to feel that Catherine was hiding something important from me about her genealogy research or her family background. I decided to conduct my own investigation into Catherine's family history to understand what she was researching and to verify the stories she had been telling me about her ancestors. What I discovered was shocking and revealed the extent of Catherine's deception about her past and her current activities. Catherine had not been researching genealogy or family history at all. Instead, she had been using genealogy websites and DNA testing services as cover for an elaborate affair with a man she had met through online dating platforms. The man Catherine was having an affair with was someone she had connected with through a genealogy forum, where they had initially bonded over their supposed shared interest in family history research. However, their relationship had quickly evolved into a romantic and sexual affair that had been ongoing for several months. Most shocking of all, Catherine had been systematically lying about her family background and personal history throughout our entire marriage. The stories she had told me about her deceased parents, her upbringing by distant relatives, and her lack of living family members were all fabrications designed to prevent me from investigating her past or contacting people who knew her before our marriage. Catherine's real family was alive and well, and they lived in a different state where she had grown up under a different name. She had been estranged from her family due to a history of dishonesty and manipulation, and she had created an entirely false identity when she moved to our city and began our relationship. The genealogy research that Catherine claimed to be conducting was actually a sophisticated cover story that allowed her to spend hours online communicating with her affair partner without arousing my suspicion. She had been using genealogy websites and family history research as an excuse to be secretive about her online activities and to justify the time she was spending on her computer. Catherine had also been using her fabricated family history as a way to manipulate my emotions and gain my sympathy throughout our marriage. The stories about her tragic childhood and her lack of family connections had been designed to make me feel protective of her and less likely to question her background or investigate her past. I realized that Catherine's deception went far beyond a simple affair. She had built our entire marriage on lies about her identity, her family, and her personal history, and she had been systematically deceiving me about fundamental aspects of who she was as a person. The most painful aspect of this discovery was understanding that Catherine had been living a completely false life throughout our marriage, and that the person I thought I had married did not actually exist. She had created an elaborate fictional identity to manipulate me into a relationship based on deception and fraud. I decided that Catherine needed to face serious consequences for her systematic deception, and that the truth about her lies needed to be exposed to protect myself and potentially other people from her manipulative behavior. I wanted to document her fraud and ensure that she was held accountable for the damage she had caused. The plan I developed was designed to gather evidence of Catherine's deception, document her affair and her lies about her identity, and expose her behavior to the people who needed to understand the truth about who she really was. Phase 1 involved working with private investigators and genealogy experts to document Catherine's real identity and family background, and to gather evidence of the systematic lies she had told about her past. Phase 2 involved documenting Catherine's affair, including gathering evidence of her communications with her affair partner and her use of genealogy research as cover for her infidelity. Phase 3 involved confronting Catherine with comprehensive evidence of her deception and giving her an opportunity to acknowledge the truth about her identity and her affair. Phase 4 involved exposing Catherine's lies to our mutual friends, her real family members, and potentially law enforcement if her deception had involved identity fraud or other criminal activities. The final phase involved ending our marriage and ensuring that Catherine could no longer use false identities or fabricated stories to deceive other people in future relationships. The investigation phase took several weeks, during which I worked with professional investigators to trace Catherine's real identity and document her actual family background. We were able to locate her real family members and verify that the stories she had told me about her past were completely fabricated. We also gathered evidence of Catherine's affair, including communications between her and her affair partner that clearly showed the romantic and sexual nature of their relationship. The evidence also showed how Catherine had been using genealogy research as cover for her infidelity. Most importantly, we documented the systematic nature of Catherine's deception and the extent to which she had fabricated her entire identity to manipulate me into marriage. The evidence showed that her lies had been carefully planned and maintained over many years. The confrontation with Catherine happened on a Sunday evening in December, exactly 18 months after she had first claimed to begin her genealogy research. I had prepared a comprehensive presentation of all the evidence I had gathered about her real identity, her fabricated past, and her ongoing affair. Instead of the quiet evening she expected, I presented Catherine with detailed documentation of her real family background, evidence of her affair, and proof that the stories she had told me about her past were completely false. I also had copies of communications between her and her affair partner. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. I had documentation proving her real identity, witness statements from her actual family members, and records showing that her genealogy research had been a cover for her affair. Catherine's reaction was initially one of shock and panic as she realized that her elaborate deception had been discovered and documented in detail. She tried to deny the evidence at first, claiming that I had misunderstood her research and that the investigators had made mistakes about her identity. But the evidence was too comprehensive and specific for her denials to be credible. I had documentation showing not just her affair, but also her systematic deception about her identity, her family background, and her personal history throughout our entire marriage. When Catherine realized that denial wasn't working, she changed tactics and tried to justify her deception by claiming that she had been trying to protect me from her difficult family situation and that her lies had been motivated by love and concern for our relationship. But I was not interested in Catherine's attempts to rationalize her systematic deception and infidelity. She had built our entire marriage on lies about her identity and had been having an affair while pretending to research family history. She needed to face the full consequences of her choices. That evening, I also revealed that I planned to expose her deception to our mutual friends and to contact her real family members to inform them about the false identity she had been using. I told her that I would be ending our marriage and that I would be taking steps to protect myself from any further deception. Catherine was devastated to learn that her lies would be exposed and that she would lose the false identity she had been using to manipulate our relationship. She begged me to handle the matter privately and suggested that she could end her affair and be honest about her past if I agreed not to expose her deception. But I had already made the decision that Catherine's systematic deception was too extensive for private resolution, and that other people needed to understand the truth about her manipulative behavior. Her lies had been too fundamental and damaging for me to consider any alternative to complete exposure. The exposure of Catherine's deception was swift and comprehensive. I shared the evidence I had gathered with our mutual friends, including documentation of her real identity and proof of her systematic lies about her family background. I also contacted Catherine's real family members to inform them about the false identity she had been using and to let them know about her marriage and her deceptive behavior. Many of her family members were shocked to learn about her lies but not surprised, as they had experienced her manipulative behavior in the past. Most importantly, I consulted with legal experts about whether Catherine's use of a false identity in our marriage constituted fraud or other criminal activities that should be reported to law enforcement. The reaction from our mutual friends was one of shock and betrayal as they realized how completely they had been deceived about Catherine's identity and background. People who had believed her stories about her tragic past felt manipulated and angry to learn that they had been used as tools in her deception. The exposure of Catherine's lies also revealed that she had been deceiving other people in our community about her background and identity, and that our marriage had not been the only relationship built on her systematic dishonesty. The most satisfying aspect of Catherine's downfall was watching her realize that her elaborate deception had ultimately achieved the opposite of what she had intended. Instead of creating a stable relationship based on my sympathy and protection, her lies had ultimately destroyed our marriage and exposed her true character to everyone who knew her. Catherine had thought she was being clever by creating a false identity that would make me more likely to commit to her and less likely to investigate her past. But she had failed to consider that her lies would eventually be discovered and that people would be angry to learn how they had been deceived. The aftermath of the exposure was decisive and comprehensive. Catherine's false identity was completely destroyed, and she was forced to face the consequences of her systematic deception and manipulation. Our mutual friends, who had previously sympathized with Catherine's supposed tragic background, became supportive of me once they understood the truth. Many people reached out to express their shock at the extent of her deception and to offer their support during the divorce process. Most importantly, Catherine's real family members were able to reconnect with her and potentially help her address the underlying issues that had led to her pattern of deception and manipulation. The divorce process was straightforward once Catherine's deception was exposed, as it became clear that our marriage had been based on fraud and systematic lies about her identity. The evidence I had gathered provided clear documentation of her deceptive behavior. The experience taught me valuable lessons about the importance of verifying important information about potential partners and being skeptical of stories that seem designed to evoke sympathy or prevent investigation. Looking back on this experience, I am proud of the way I handled the discovery of Catherine's deception. I could have confronted her immediately when I first became suspicious, but instead I took the time to gather comprehensive evidence that exposed the full scope of her lies and manipulation. The marriage that I had thought was built on love and mutual support had actually been built on systematic deception and identity fraud. But the process of exposing Catherine's lies had also revealed my own strength and resilience, and it had prepared me to build future relationships based on honesty and genuine connection. Catherine's affair and identity deception had been interconnected crimes against our marriage and against the principle of honest relationships. She had been willing to fabricate her entire identity and maintain elaborate lies for years to manipulate me into a relationship based on false sympathy and protection. The revenge I orchestrated against Catherine was comprehensive and devastating, but it was also necessary to protect my interests and to expose the truth about her manipulative behavior. She had chosen to build our relationship on lies and deception, and she had to face the full consequences of her choices. The genealogy research that had enabled Catherine's deception had also provided the framework for exposing her lies. The irony was not lost on me that the very family history research she had claimed to be conducting had ultimately led to the discovery of her real identity and the exposure of her systematic deception. In the end, Catherine's elaborate deception had achieved the opposite of what she had intended. Instead of creating a stable marriage based on my sympathy and protection, her lies had ultimately cost her our relationship and had exposed her true character to everyone who knew her. The most important outcome of this entire experience was that I was able to reclaim my life from Catherine's web of lies and deception. I was no longer living with someone who had fabricated her entire identity, and I was free to build future relationships based on honesty and genuine connection. The evidence that had exposed Catherine's deception served as a reminder that systematic lies ultimately leave traces that can be discovered and documented. Her careful planning and elaborate false identity had ultimately been no match for thorough investigation and professional verification. Catherine learned that relationships built on lies and false identities come with consequences that extend far beyond the immediate manipulation they are meant to provide. She lost our marriage, her false identity, and her ability to continue deceiving people about her past. She discovered that the love and trust of a spouse, once broken through systematic deception, could not be repaired or replaced. Her lies had destroyed not just our marriage, but also her relationships with friends and community members who were shocked by her deceptive behavior. The revenge was complete, the truth was exposed, and I was finally free to build a new life based on the values of honesty and authenticity that Catherine had abandoned. I had won not just a personal victory in exposing her deception, but a victory that protected other potential victims from her manipulative behavior.